We'll call the meeting to order at 9:30. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. Our first item is our agenda. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Claus?
I'll move the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Claus. Any discussion? Claus's motion to approve the agenda as presented. I'll ask the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Moving down, item C, adoption of the minutes, council meeting minutes from the January 13th, 2022 meeting. You've all been provided the minutes. Are there any errors, omissions, or any issues with the minutes that you see? John?
Yeah, I'd like to move that the minutes be adopted as presented.
Thank you, John. John has moved adoption of the minutes from our January 13th, 2022 meeting. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Just looking down through the agenda, we do have two delegations today. First, one at 9:30. We have Stephen Mathyk from AEP. And then at 11 o'clock, we have MLA Grant Hunter joining us. So, without further ado, why don't we, if we're ready to go, why don't we start with our 9:30. Welcome to, I see multiple faces on the screen, so welcome to everyone from Lethbridge County. I'm Reeve Torrey Campbell, and the rest of council is all here in the room. So whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
You sharing some time with us today. I'm going to just put up a PowerPoint presentation on the screen to kind of guide our discussion, so just bear with me, please. Apologies for the technical difficulties here. So hopefully you should see the full slide shot in front of you now. So thank you very much for having us today. So this is a quick orientation presentation from AEP Regulatory Assurance Division, and in particular the Lethbridge District of AEP's Regulatory Assurance Division. So our intent today is to provide a bit of an outline here in terms of introductions, our overview of our district, some organizational structure changes that have undertaken in recent times, our regulatory transformation that we're undertaking as a department, some approvals and compliance program overviews, so how we kind of link into some of the local authorities and how we work together. Some key areas of AEP interfaces, we'll review those, and we're also going to kind of dive a little deeper into water co-ops and how those are managed under the AEP legislation and jurisdiction. So first, I'll just quickly run a quick introduction. So again, my name is Stephen Mathyk. I'm the Regulatory Assurance Manager out of the Lethbridge office of the Lethbridge District in Regulatory Assurance Division, and we're just located in the provincial building across from the old shopping center there. And I've been with the department in and around 16 or so years. And I'll just pass it over to Dorothy Locke here quickly.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dorothy Locke. I am the Approvals Manager here in Lethbridge. So just a bit of background about myself. I've been with the department for 17 years, working in the Lethbridge District. And prior to going into the management position, I was working in the area of municipal approvals. So my background is in that area. But I do oversee the approvals program for the Lethbridge District.
Thanks, Dorothy.
And hello, my name is Corinne Bates. I am the Compliance Manager here in the Lethbridge District. And yeah, a bit of my background. So I've been with the department, I think I'm at 16 years as well, and I have been with compliance with the environment the entire time, gone through a couple of different areas in the province I've worked, but started out as an inspector, investigator, and now am the compliance manager here in Lethbridge. So thanks very much for allowing us to be here.
Thanks, And this was done to kind of better align our department with the goals and priorities of the department in terms of reduction of red tape, supporting economic delivery, some of our regulatory transformation and modernization that was taking place. And so what we did was split the department into 6 divisions. And you'll see here that our deputy minister is Bev Yee. My assistant deputy minister is Stacey Smythe. She's the Regulatory Assurance Division ADM, that's noted here. And as we go down, we have 2 Regulatory Assurance Division regions. We have the RAD North and the RAD South, and we're in the RAD South. And Roger Ramshrita is my executive director for the South. He's out of the Calgary office. And then as we kind of filter down the organization, we also have 3 districts within the Regulatory Assurance Division South. And I'm the Regulatory Assurance Manager overseeing the Lethbridge District, but we also have a similar structure in Calgary District and Red Deer District. And then as we chatted about in our introductions, Karine is noted here as the Compliance Manager, so she administers the compliance sections of our work. And then Dorothy Locke is our Approvals Manager, and underneath them are a variety of staff. We're in and around 20 to 24 staff, depending on our staffing rate at the time, but they look after those 2 teams. So a little bit about our regulatory transformation. So the core of it is what's called the Regulatory Assurance Framework, and really what this is a transition based on what we have heard from those that were engaged in our processes. And so what we did here is that, folks would submit applications. They'd have a tough time understanding if they have a complete application. There's a lot of time spent in what we term as this review and decision stage of the application, doing a lot of supplemental information requests, a lot of back and forth that got frustrating. Clients were also indicating that they were kind of aware at what stage and where they were at with their applications. And I think, we still struggle with that today as we move into the new world that I'll describe here. But really what we've done is broken down our business into these 6 stages of regulatory assurance. And where we used to spend that time, as I mentioned, is in review and decision. And what we're doing now is shifting our resources so that we work much more closely with clients up front in what we term as the discovery phase, so that when they do make an application, it's clear, the application is complete, and they can move through the rest of the regulatory process in a more streamlined fashion. The other piece that we're looking at is the major shifts is the operate and report piece of our business. So folks like Jeremy will be knowledgeable about having inspections done on, say, drinking water treatment plants and things like that. We're going to be focused more on proactive inspections and verification activities in the back end of our process, so that we can help approval holders with any issues they might have and work them through the process. And really what this is about is being partners in regulatory assurance rather than having kind of this black box that things go into and having a relationship that doesn't get off on the right foot. So in short, these are kind of the shifts in resources and philosophical base that we're undertaking to move away from this old paradigm and move into the new paradigm. And we're kind of just starting out in that process, and there's various pieces of that that are underway right now. You may have heard of, I'm sure Jeremy's heard of the Digital Regulatory Assurance System. And what this is, we term it DRAS. And what DRAS is a new technological backbone to our regulatory assurance system. And it's intended, it's a computerized system that's intended to be a one window in and out for regulatory authorizations anywhere from our Water Act business to our public lands business. And it's to be a clear way into our business, but also set out kind of clear expectations and ensure that we have first step is to interact, of course, with the folks that they're interacting with first on the ground level. But if there's an issue, to escalate that to Corinne or Dorothy. And if they have any issues trying to resolve the problem, I can also be contacted to try to work through any hiccups or troubleshoot the issue. We've done this before, Ann and I have worked very closely on a couple of items, and Jeremy, I think it works out fairly well. And it kind of short circuits going to, say, a political level where that request would come back down to me to actually address it and bring it back up and go around. That's still totally at your prerogative in terms of engaging at the political level with our minister or what have you. But certainly, I'm a resource for you if you're kind of scratching your head as to what the next steps might be with an issue. And what I'll do now is just pass this over to Dorothy to run through a little bit of her role and our approvals program.
Okay, so like I said, I'm the manager for approvals in Lethbridge. Basically, in approvals, we oversee the delivery of our district. Well, I oversee the delivery of our district approvals program. So I'm the primary statutory decision maker for authorizations under both the Water Act and the Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act. So these include approvals, include licenses, water licenses. On my team, I do work with, my team consists of engineers, technicians, hydrogeologists, and we work under both APIA, which is the Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act, as well as the Water Act. And we're broken down into two teams. I have two teams under me. One team is the industrial team, and they work under APIA mainly. They work on authorizations, usually approvals. There are some codes of practices that we issue as well. And we work with major industries, and they include agribusiness, they include manufacturing, as well as waste management, food processing type industries. And some examples of these industries that we work with include, in this area, McCain's, Green Prairie, Cavendish. We also work with landfills, and we work in sand and gravel and pits. So that's kind of under the industrial APIA umbrella. The other team that works, that reports to me is the water team. And under the water team, we have the municipal team that works under APIA, as well as the water team that works under the Water Act. So for the municipal side of things, we issue authorizations for waterworks systems, for wastewater systems, as well as whether it's the bigger municipal systems in cities, and we also work with water co-ops, public facilities, so parks and things like that. So in this area, I know we have water co-ops, we have the city of Lethbridge, we have smaller towns, and I think even some business parks within the county that we regulate. So we deal with the bigger systems, but we also have distribution systems, collection systems, which are under codes of practices. As part of the water team, there's also the Water Act side component to this, and the Water Act side deals with anything to do with water licensing for taking water out of the river or taking water from groundwater wells. As well, we also require authorizations and approvals or codes of practices for working within and around water bodies, as well as working with water drinking. Anything to do with water, a lot of times will require something from a Water Act side. Some examples of authorizations that we issue under grant include water licenses. So for groundwater as well as surface water. Surface water licenses in this area, the basin is basically closed, so we're talking about license transfers. So that comes up a lot in conversations. We also do temporary diversion licenses. We have codes and practices for bridge crossings, drainage and stormwater approvals. that require Water Act approvals, and Water Act approvals, for working in and around water bodies, as well as, for wetland disturbances. And that kind of gives you an overview of the work that we do. My team consists, we're about 12 of us as a team. And again, if there are ever any questions technically, give us a call, give my team a call. And if you ever need anything more, feel free to give me a call as well. And that's kind of the overview of my team.
Thanks, Dorothy. We'll just shift over now to Karine, and she can walk us through a little bit of our compliance program.
Yeah, certainly. I lost the screen there for a minute there, Steve.
That's my fault. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I can just keep going and bring
It
it up.
should be back up for you now. Sorry about that.
All good. So I'm the compliance manager here in Lethbridge, and so basically my primary function is to oversee a team of environmental protection officers. So we have 9 right now, soon to be 10. It's pretty exciting. We were a pretty lean crew for a long time, so exciting times for us is for sure. And I'm a statutory decision maker under the acts that I have here in compliance, and my primary, goal or delivery is to ensure we are delivering on the compliance assurance program for AEP. And so from a jurisdictional perspective, the focus of my authorities from a legislative perspective are APEA, which is the Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act, and the Water Act. Those are our 2 primary, I would say, pieces of legislation that we look at here. But we do have the Public Lands Act as well. So that was, I can't remember when that came in, a few years ago that was brought in. So another part of our duties. The approach, so we have some founding principles that kind of are part of the compliance assurance framework, and they are education, prevention, and enforcement. So these are pretty core for us, and I would say we primarily look at education and prevention. That's kind of my focus here with the team. So with those, you're going to see things such as inspections and investigations. That's where those would kind of come from, and they come to my staff in a variety of ways. Primarily, they come through calls. So we have a hotline number that some of you may be aware of. Those come to us through calls, and I would say we get approximately in Lethbridge here anywhere from 800 to 1,000 calls a year. Provincially, I think it ranges up to 14,000 or 15,000 a year, just depending on the year. So it's a significant amount. But in those calls, those are generated through a couple ways. So some of it's public complaints. It can come in a variety of different topics, mostly again related to the PIA and the Water Act, and also through regulated industry. So we get a lot of those as well. So that kind of makes up the bulk of what we do from the education prevention component. I guess I should say, so most of the stuff that we do has been reactive, and I think Steve touched on a little bit about us moving into this proactive. So compliance has been mostly reactive, so public complaints are reactive, even calls that we get in through the regulated industry. We do have one program though that is proactive, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. It's the drinking water program. So that's where we have dedicated staff. I have a couple on my team that target the regulated parties that are under the drinking water program. So this would involve some co-ops. This would be, centers such as Lethbridge, any drinking water facility that we regulate. So we do look at those proactively as well. So, and that's really a flagship part of our program right now. And I'm pretty excited because it looks like with the new systems, with regulatory transformation, we're going to be able to expand that and kind of get back to, I think, a really important piece of what compliance is. One of our function is prevention, and that's that proactive inspection. So that's exciting. The enforcement piece, we absolutely do this as well. This is, again, it's foundational, part of this pillar. We previously, so myself as a statutory decision maker, would have been involved in all the enforcement decisions, so that could be punitive as well. Those could be things such as, administrative penalties or prosecution. This was recently, though, branched off to a different department, so we're partners with them. There's a decision maker in that branch that would make decisions just for the enforcement piece, so this punitive piece. When it comes to, though, there is another aspect of enforcement in this pillar, and it's this remedial enforcement actions. It's on one of the bullets there. Those are things that you may have seen as orders. So these orders that we issue, and those are within my wheelhouse, are something that we would look at if we felt that there was something that was important to fix or repair, and we needed to compel somebody to do something. So most of it's for protection of the environment. We need to fix something. So that's kind of what those are. You may have seen them and maybe have been involved, but it's a component that we do have is here in compliance. And then, oh sorry, I see I was jumping around a little bit. And then another piece I do want to mention that's a part of my team is this emergency response. So we have trained officers here on the team. I have a couple of them, and they support this bigger environmental emergency response program that we have provincially. We call them regional responders, but essentially they're trained up. They're on call 24/7, and they can be reached anytime through this hotline number, so there's always someone there. And they would respond to these big emergencies. And I can think of a few even this year for you guys in the county of Lethbridge. I think you had a couple of train derailments. So we would respond to potentially those, as well as some of the big ones that we had. I think a year ago we had a larger train derailment in the Crow's Nest Pass. So it can be things like fires as well, and different things. So that's a part of my team as well. And just trying to think if we missed anything else. That's generally what we do. We try to be responsive. That's a huge, component of what I really try to install with the team is timeliness, getting back to people. And as Dorothy said, we are here to help you. We want to be, aware of things, and so my team is always someone that you could pick up the phone and call. I know a lot of you have very close relationships with officers on my team. I know I did when I was an inspector here in that role, and again with also myself as well. I'm always open to phone calls, and we want to have that relationship. So that's my team.
Great, thanks for that, Corinne. So what I'll do is just maybe kind of try to wrap some things up here. So I think we went through it extremely quickly. Obviously we have a lot of work, and we have a very broad kind of mandate and a broad district to deal with. But I think on the screen is some of the key areas where we interface with counties, local authorities, etc., and specifically with the County of Lethbridge. We already mentioned drinking water facilities, distribution systems. Those are our co-ops, waste management facilities, those types of things. One of the things that I'll highlight here is the other items, which are flood management and water shortage management. And I mentioned that before, that's kind of one of our high priority strategic focuses in terms of water management is that water shortage piece. So I chair the water shortage management response committee for the province. A lot of our work is out of this area, Milk River area, but southern Alberta. And certainly you would have seen us kind of at work over last year working on some emergency programs and dealing with management actions related to shortage. But we do administer that part of the business as well. So maybe just as a wrap up, I know we're running low on time. So I'll just step into water co-ops, given the context that we've provided you, and again, it's a lot, but I'll try to wrap those concepts into the water co-op situation. So as Dorothy mentioned before, and so did Corinne, our jurisdiction are squarely within the Water Act and the Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act. And what that means for water co-ops, in particular rural water co-ops, is that we deal with the allocation of water under the Water Act that goes to those co-ops, and we deal with the treatment of the water that is delivered and distributed through those co-ops. So under the Water Act, we would have a water license related to the diversion of the water. That water license would set out the points of diversion, so the places where the water is coming from, and the points of use where the water is going to, that need to be reflected in any given water license. And the use of the water must be reflected in the license purpose. I highlight this because we have had issues with various co-ops kind of starting to go from just delivery to, say, a household distribution system into, say, businesses and other industrial activities. And if that license purpose isn't reflecting those activities, there's some things we need to do there to update the license to make sure it's appropriately administering those purposes under the Act. The other component is, as we mentioned, in the Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act. And so with respect to water co-ops, what they will have will be something treated water pipeline or distribution system that they're using to deliver water within the system. There may be an approval associated with where they're getting the water, and that might be related to the water treatment plant. So we'll have an authorization that authorizes the safe use, reporting, monitoring of a water treatment plant that delivers the water through the pipeline or to the pipeline. So, for example, a distribution system might receive treated water through the city of Lethbridge, and of course we regulate the city of Lethbridge's water treatment plant, and then we would regulate the distribution system on the other side of the equation in the water co-op that's receiving that water. Authorization requirements are under a P are really health focused, really kind of dealing with risks of people consuming water. So we're really looking at requirements around treating, monitoring, oversight, and reporting related to the use and distribution of that water. So say in a water co-op scenario, there's a distribution system, and say that if that co-op has the registration in their name, then they would be responsible for things like reporting to the department on an annual and monthly basis. They would be responsible for taking samples and doing that on a routine basis as per the requirements of their registration, making sure that the drinking water is safe within the distribution system itself. And another thing I'll highlight for, just to wrap up co-ops, is that another kind of pinch point that we see throughout Southern Alberta is the requirement of certified operators. And those are folks that are trained up and certified under the province's Certified Operators Program to actually run and maintain anything from a distribution system up to a city of Lethbridge, very sophisticated water treatment plant. But to get those trained folks into rural areas is pretty tough. I know a lot of smaller centers have troubles retaining or finding these folks. And I know in a lot of scenarios, local authorities like yourself actually provide that assistance to various portions of their jurisdiction to help those communities make sure that they're delivering safe water and sharing those operator oversight, or actually providing operators in those cases. And just to wrap up water co-ops finally, is that I did want to point out that there's another piece of a jurisdiction from the provincial perspective related to water co-ops, and that's governance. So under the Alberta Rural Utilities Act, the water co-ops are actually enacted as an association. And that Rural Utility Act, I would kind of translate that over to, in your context, the Municipal Government Act. So it sets out things like, who can, what boards can be composed of, how money is managed, how elections are managed, how bylaws are developed. So all those things are kind of set up in the Rural Utilities Act, and specifically for water co-ops. The jurisdiction of the Rural Utilities Act is actually under the Alberta Agriculture and Rural Economic Development Department. So the folks in Alberta Agriculture administer that act and oversee any potential issues with things like governance. So there are provisions under that act to approach agriculture and under certain circumstances ask for, say, things like reviews of board activities and things like that under the auspices of the requirements of the Rural Utilities Act. So I wanted to highlight that's very much for the governance side, and Alberta Environment and Parks deals with the allocation and treatment side. And then just the final thing for water co-ops is there is a federation of rural water co-ops, and you're likely aware of that, but certainly there's a number of co-ops that are within the Lethbridge County that are listed as members in that association, and that federation. And they kind of are a body that supports rural co-ops in terms of the needs that they have for things like operation manuals, or things that are kind of broader scope items that, say, one or two co-ops wouldn't be able to manage on their own, but as a collective, they can come together and resource things that matter to the sector in general. So I just listed their website there for anybody's interest. And in conclusion, that was a lot of information. I realize that, and so I wanted to provide our contact information and thank folks again for having us and allowing us to come in and do this blitz of information related to our work and business, and also to offer up at any time if council wishes to have us in to chat about any specific components of our business or specific issues. We're happy to do that. We have a great working relationship with Anne and her staff, so it's been very good that way. So happy to join in. Like I say, if there's any time where you're scratching your head, you want to escalate things to figure out what's
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much, Stephen, and everyone else on the call. We really appreciate your time, and I would echo your sentiment. I know Anne. Sorry about the echo. Anne has been very appreciative of the relationship between our office, our council, our county, and your staff at AEP. I think you hit it on the nail on the head. You've been available to us, and we appreciate you extending that offer for any further discussions. Are there any questions from council? Klaus?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to direct a question to whoever wants to take it. That we are short, very short on potable water for industrial expansion that we have in the county, and could there be some push to be able to get some potable water somehow through the city, and I'm also talking about the wastewater situation, that we get some communication that we can expand, because this holds us from being able to expand into industrial situations, because we do have for household and but not for industrial.
Right. So I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing, so I'm just going to maybe repeat back what I thought I heard, and I think that was a question about industrial water related to industrial expansion within the county, some access to water and potable water, et cetera, for that type of expansion, and some limiting factors as well around wastewater treatment and or facilities to accommodate that expansion in the county is what I think I heard. If that is the case, I think what we can certainly look and work with the county on, if there's strategic plans that you folks have in place or things that you kind of have in mind of how you want to expand and where you want to expand, we can certainly have discussions about the regulatory opportunities or those types of partnerships that might come about depending on the location or depending on kind of where you want to go and what you want to do. Obviously, we're very supportive of industrial agribusiness, any type of economic development that occurs around Lethbridge County. And I will kind of parrot back what I've heard from other industry is that there are those challenges that you've listed. It's, where's that source of water? How do we get that source of water that will actually accommodate the processes required? And then how do we deal with our waste streams? So in what we have done, and I think the county's already kind of leveraging this already, is that we have, we typically put people in touch with folks like the city of Lethbridge and get into some things like regional pipelines and things like that. If it's a matter of just changing purposes for existing infrastructure, we can certainly chat about that. And I think we're actually dealing with something similar with south of town here with the South County Co-op right now with a change in purpose to their license. So I think the long-winded answer here is I think we understand that challenge and are happy to kind of speak kind of more at a detailed level on what strategies you're thinking of and how we can best complement them. We might be able to point you in the right direction in terms of where's the best place to maybe locate an industry if it's close to, say, an irrigation district or some other delivery. I think that would be my final highlight, is that we have worked very closely with folks like irrigation districts to supply water to industries as well when that's a limiting factor. So there's a couple of different options there, but certainly recognizing that water in general is a challenge. Treated water is another challenge, and certainly there has to be some kind of thoughtful discussion about how and where we kind of promote those types of industries.
Thank you, Stephen. Any other questions from council? Stephen, I do have one question. I know when you first started, you spoke about cutting red tape and streamlining and maybe modifying some of your processes. Do you foresee anything further along those lines? And I guess pointed at where you mentioned the involvement of Alberta Ag and rural economic development in this portfolio as well, and how there is some overlap there. do you foresee a scenario where potentially this could come under one roof, where we wouldn't be going through different ministries, different ministers, different departments? Do you foresee that as part of the streamlining and the cutting of the red tape?
I do, at a general level, I do. Now, if we're speaking strictly about water co-ops, that right now, I guess it would, we'd have to have a mandate shift with respect to legislation for that. Not to say that that's impossible, but I do at a broader level, and we're already doing this. So we've put in place some pilot projects related to, for instance, things like the large off-stream water developments for the irrigation districts, other agribusiness, stimulus-funded agribusiness. We've put into place a program there as well, a pilot program that actually integrates all those pieces you're speaking about. Now, it doesn't bring the departments together into one department under one umbrella, but what it does is it has a person such as myself that actually has a process in place that brings all of those people into one process and streamlines that process by having them, having them connected with all the referrals, having our regulatory processes align with each other. We've embedded our investment folks that deal directly with investors and folks that are trying to develop on the landscape. They're in that team. So really an integrated approach to cut through as much of that red tape as possible and get people up and running from both a financial and a regulatory perspective. So I'm very hopeful that we're going to take those pilot projects in what we were terming in the beginning of the presentation as discovery, in that discovery phase to actually do what you've just mentioned and get through all those various components, bring them into one and run them through at the same time. And that's very much what we're looking to do now. And we've had a fair bit of success with that, especially on the agribusiness side, where we're working with even local authorities, the applicant, our investment folks, Alberta Agriculture, some of our federal components, and we're working with that all under one umbrella towards a single point of an outcome, which is a successful application and a successful approval to move forward. So long-winded way to say yes, and I am open to, and that's part of my role locally here as your representative in the Lethbridge district, I'm open to speaking about those types of processes locally. If we can take some learnings already from those pilot projects and embed them into processes here, depending on the resources and how we align it, I'm happy to start to pilot things like that even now. So open to further discussion.
Thank you for that, Stephen. That's encouraging to hear, so thank you. Anything further from council? Seeing nothing further, Corinne, Dorothy, Stephen, thank you very much for your time this morning. We sure appreciate it, and we look forward to working with you all in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you. Jeremy, is there anything in particular that you would like to address first on the agenda, or can we just move through it from top to bottom? Or
No, we are good to proceed on to the next item, which will be Devon's infrastructure. If
okay,
that's
thank you.
agreeable from
Sorry.
you, if that's agreeable to you.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, then we will move down to department reports, infrastructure. G1.1, rescind policy 350, public road right-of-way request for information and regulatory signs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Morning, Devon.
Morning. So, the past year or so, administration has been bringing these policies forward for rescinding, revision, things like that. So this is just a continuation of that. And this particular policy, request for information and regulatory signs, is quite old and is really no longer relevant to our current operations. Basically, this policy allows for the public to apply for either a regulatory or information sign. Currently, Public Works determines what regulatory signage is required for the safe operation of vehicles and equipment on county infrastructure. and they install signage in the proper location based on engineering standards, provincial regulations, and things like that. Requests for the installation of information signs within a road allowance are very infrequent, and business signage on private property is regulated through the land use bylaw, in which an application must be made to the county. Just some background information. As I mentioned, we're going through the process, administration is going through the process of cleaning up these policies. This one is almost 30 years old, and even though it was updated about 10 years ago, it doesn't seem to be required for our current operations. As I mentioned, operations, Jeremy's department determines, based on legal requirements and standards, what signage should be installed and where it should be installed. So I guess an alternative would be to leave the current policy in place. Pro to that would be the public could apply for a sign if they feel it is needed. A con would be that there could be a perception that the public could determine where signage should be placed. So based on that, the recommendation is to rescind policy 350, public road right-of-way, request for information and regulatory signs. Is there any questions from council?
Thank you, Devin. Lauren?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just one question comes to my mind. How does a person get a stock crossing sign then if you're going to eliminate this policy?
A stock crossing sign?
Yeah.
So like cattle crossing?
Yeah.
Jeremy, do you have a?
For any of those type of requests, we would obviously look at a case-by-case basis and determine whether or not we would actually, what the conditions of that request essentially is. For stock crossings, I mean, we don't encourage people to drive their cattle up the road. That has happened occasionally. I've seen herds of goats moving up and down a few roads, but that's not necessarily what I think you're referring to as far as a stock crossing. So maybe a little further definition as far as that goes.
So basically what I'm asking, I know my neighbors have one, and it's just simply to get their cows from the pasture on the west side of the road to the east side of the road. There's no way to get them there unless you haul them other than crossing the road. So how do you, if you want one of those signs, the way I'm reading this new regulation is you can't come and apply for one. So how do you get one?
Similar to, I mean, we might have to look at that as far as from a road use agreement side. Like, I mean, if we've got, if we have animals, vehicles, whatever the case is, transversing roadways, like we get several requests from livestock providers, and we do currently get quite a few from livestock providers about moving materials from one land site to the other and crossing the roadway with large rock trucks and so on for large materials, and we enter into a road use agreement essentially with them for that period of time. And as it is occasional, it's not a consistent process, or happens every other day per se, then we would look at that, like I said, on a case-by-case basis. Stock requests, I can't think of too many that I know of in the countryside as of right now.
I guess that kind of, it almost leads to a huge amount of adding more red tape to me. Like if you gotta come and get a permit so cows can go from one side of the road to the other side, that seems very laborious on not only your staff, but the person who's doing it. Like it just seems to be cumbersome to me. Like if I wanna move my cow from one side of the road to the other side, I'd have to come in and make an appointment to do that. That just seems like a tremendous amount of work for you and for the person who's doing it.
If there is such requests, I mean, to create designated crossing areas, that's something we need to look at from a larger standpoint. This is dealing more with regulatory signs and information signage, because that is, I mean, all of that has to follow Transportation Association of Canada guidelines and procedures for installations, and that's what we would want. If we have designated stock crossings that we need to identify, that should be something that needs to be communicated to us. But as we are in a very large agriculture area with a lot of cattle, that would be fairly extensive if we were to put stock crossings in every place that's moving land, adjacent land.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to sort of expand what Councillor Hickey was saying and just maybe broaden the scope of this. Without this policy, is there a procedure in place for somebody, and appreciating that it's very infrequent, that wants to come in and have an information sign put in place?
We have it within our schedule of fees currently that people can make sign requests, and those sign requests are then vetted by our department and then installed accordingly. If approved, with all of those charges for those signs charged back to whoever the request is. So in that case, stock crossing sign, if someone put that request in through a formal manner, then we would review that, evaluate it, and then approve it accordingly. But those costs would be borne by essentially the person requesting that.
Claus?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the question that Lord has, if I may, Lord, try to explain a little bit. I think it's just for it's usually the cow people that pasture their animals, that they can just cross the road, and that you don't have to come for a permit to the county first to ask that, because I mean it's weather related and all kinds of stuff. If the moment that you got time, you got people together, you're going to move those animals across, and that you can just move those animals across, put the signs up just temporarily, and say there's that these animals are being moved now, and that precautions are taken by the owner.
Currently, we have no restriction, as we are not asking residents to apply for permits to move cattle essentially at this time.
So with other words, you're saying it's no problem? Okay.
Yeah.
Mark and then Morris. Did you have one, Morris? Mark and then Morris, please.
Thanks, Tori. So my experience with this has been, we've never had to get permits to move cattle. We have neighbors have pasture across the road, and we just park a truck down. There's a 1.5 mile section, so you just block it off or watch, and then we move the animals down the ditch and across, and it's a 15-20 minute thing. It's not like I've seen in the Pincher Creek area where they're running them 5 miles down a highway. I was not that's what I was going to ask, is if there's any permits required. So if there's not, I mean, why putting up a sign? I've seen them in the highway cattle crossings, and I thought, well, why are they here? These guys move their cows across once a year, so it seems kind of, it's there, I guess, to watch for it. But I don't see an issue with this, with rescinding this policy, because it refers mostly to vehicle traffic and the signage. If we don't need permits to move animals, then I don't see it as an issue at all. So.
Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't completely agree with that policy being rescinded. I think it is always a good, somewhat of a heads up down on there when you're on the road and you see a sign and it's, what are you laughing for? But anyways, when you see a sign down there, cattle crossing or school bus stops or whatever down there, it makes you aware of it, that you should be slowing down and maybe watch out for it. But if that's going to be gone, what are you going to have in place? The other one is like with us with silos hauling and sugar beet hauling and probably some potato guys too. We put up signs a lot of times along the road down there, and either it says tracking, which means we might be tracking mud onto the road, or the other one is trucks turning. Do we need a permit for that now when we put these signs up?
No, there is no permit process for that. That is, as we kind of talked about red tape, I mean, that would be a onerous process to basically try and regulate that, especially considering the agricultural activity in this area. That'd be like having permits for every time a farmer needs to cultivate his land and then use the roadway accordingly.
So then, getting back to that again, when we had that a couple of times already, that we were tracking, coming out of the field, and we were basically told to put a signage down on there so people are aware of that it's happening, tracking and whatever else. And that should be in place. Who enforces that? that you should have something like that in place.
Typically, we deal with that on a case-by-case basis, and it's only if we get complaints from adjacent landowners that we ask people to put out mud tracking signs.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I can just sort of make sure that I wrap my head around this, the request to rescind this policy, or the recommendation to rescind this policy, is based on twofold. Number one, regulatory signs are controlled by a number of other policies and regulations, both from the county and provincially. And if there is somebody that actually does want to request an information sign, there are other avenues and policies in place that would address that, which would make this a completely redundant policy then, if I'm to understand this correctly.
That is correct, and like I said, it's in our schedule of fees currently that all signs, information signage would be at the purview of the landowner.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Given that information, I would like to move that the county rescind policy 350, public road right-of-way request for information and regulatory signs.
Thank you, John. Any further discussion? Seeing none, John has moved to rescind policy 350, public road right-of-way request for information and regulatory signs. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Devin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Moving down, item G 1.2, SMID pipeline installation waiver request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just pull this up on the mapping system here before I get started. All right, so the St. Mary River Irrigation District is requesting a setback waiver for the installation of an irrigation pipeline. Our current policy in place, 353, states any pipelines parallel to the county road allowance shall be 15 meters, at least 15 meters away from the road allowance boundary. This request, the reason why I'm bringing it to council is because SMRID is requesting to be within the road allowance. I have authority under that policy to grant a waiver of it, but not to actually allow it to be within the road allowance, which is why I'm here today. The existing irrigation ditch that they have been utilizing along this road right here, it used the east ditch of the county road allowance for a delivery of a small amount of irrigation water to those parcels. As council is aware, the concrete canal along the north end of Highway 519 is getting converted to a pipeline, and as such, they would like to pipeline the delivery within that area as well. So what the SMRID has proposed is to install the pipeline within the west road allowance between the power poles and the shoulder of the roadway.
Sorry, Devin, hold on a sec.
Yep.
Lauren?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you mean, you say 519?
512, 512, I believe, yeah.
Apologies.
Oh, I was
Yep.
thinking, where's that?
Sorry, I get those highways mixed up. 512.
Thank you.
Apologies. A little bit of, I guess, background information as I've learned through going back and forth with SMRID. Originally, before the subdivision was here, the SMRID did have an easement along here for the delivery of irrigation water. When this subdivision came in, the road plan basically went over top of that easement and it effectively disappeared. It no longer exists anymore. So they have been conveying water down the county ditch for some time. So it's really a benefit to the county as well as SMRID to have this go into pipeline. Then we don't have to worry about water going down that ditch and some previous issues of too much water being sent down and some reports of flooding in that area.
Devin, could you zoom out for a sec?
Sure.
John, does this help?
So this is the Broxburn Business Park right here. If you can see my mouse, and we're talking about this area right there.
And that's referred to as the Pater subdivision is what we're,
Correct.
okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deb.
You're welcome. So in saying that, you know, I do have an alternative. Council could choose to reject the application. Pro would be the pipeline would not be located in the county road allowance, you know, potentially making it easier to complete work in that area if required. A con would be the SMRID may have to incur additional expense to place the pipeline on private lands, or they may not get permission at all. They have been working with adjacent landowners and have exhausted that option in trying to put it on private land, which is why they approached the county to put it in the road allowance. Keep in mind with the current policy, 353 in place, should the county need to do any work in that area, they must relocate their pipeline to accommodate our works. So we do have that avenue in the future should something come up.
Sorry. Lauren?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So is that the road that a few years ago they were talking about paving by, okay.
Yeah, there was talk of the residents getting together and submitting a local improvement tax petition package, and they did not submit a fully filled, I guess. It wasn't deemed sufficient by the CAO what they had submitted, and nothing had really came back from that.
Class?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Devin, the pipeline that's going to be coming there will be a big improvement for not having excess water coming through that ditch and coming higher and maybe endangering the road?
That's correct. There'll be very minimal water in that east ditch now. It doesn't really pick up any drainage. It's purely, for irrigation delivery. So that should help in not having that water saturate the road.
Class?
So with that said, I'll move that the St. Mary's River Irrigation District pipeline installation waiver within the west ditch of the Range Road 21-0A road allowance be as per plans provided.
Thank you, Class. Any further discussion from council? Eric and then Morris, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We talked that, or you mentioned that water was getting delivered through the county road ditch. With this project being completed, have we addressed drainage?
Yes, so the ditch is going to remain in place. I did chat with the SMRID about a little bit of scouring that happened at the discharge point adjacent to the highway, and they have agreed to fix that up, but the existing ditch will stay in place, so any natural drainage that may have entered there will still be conveyed in that ditch.
Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not opposed to this at all. Matter of fact, I think it's probably an improvement, for having that open ditch gone down there. And however, we're gonna be granting a waiver down here, and to me, there was a private guy down there, but which was Lohi's down there, and to me, that was basically the same thing. It was not interfering with anything, and he could have gotten a waiver too down there that if it needed to be moved, it could be moved. It probably never ever happened, and that's the same thing with the pipeline. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Morris. Any further discussion from council? Seeing none, Class has moved that county council approve the St. Mary River Irrigation District pipeline installation waiver within the west ditch of the Range Road 21-0A road allowance as per the plans provided. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Devin.
Thank you, council. Thank you very much, Councilor Dienstler.
Moving down, item G2, Municipal Services, G2.1, 2022 Level of Service, Public Works Operations. Morning, Jeremy.
Good morning, council. Good morning, Mr. Chair. So I'm here today to present, similar to last year. This is we passed the first level of service policy through council back in the summer of 2021, and this would be the revised version of the level of service policy for 2022. Now this is for summer operations. We've already covered off on the winter operations level of service back earlier this year. So bear with me as I go through this process. So administration had previously developed over several years a level of service policy document that formalizes the majority of gravel road services and maintenance the Public Works Department provides to the county stakeholders. As a budget is approved annually and finite, the level of service policy provides clear direction as to the services provided. This has updated 2022 budget numbers, essentially for the costing for the level of services that is provided within the document. The level of service policy is intended to provide a baseline of the core services, not an exhaustive list of the Public Works daily, weekly, monthly, yearly operations. The level of service baseline provides a targeted level of service that council approves to be provided to the service area. As we've gone through several workshops, this is part of how council can move the needle on the level of service, and as we make adjustments year to year, this is a document that is going to be recurringly coming up, so the council can make adjustments to the level of service as they see fit. As far as previous council direction, as I said, we had during budget council approved the budget for 2022 operational services during budget deliberations in the fall of 2021. This essentially represents those services that were included in the budget that was approved. The 2022 Public Works level of service formalizes the services provided for spring, summer, fall of 2022. As far as the level of service history, council did approve this document back in July of 2021 after several workshops and strategic discussions. This replaced a previous policy that had not been updated since 2010. The 2021 level of service represented the calendar year, and this will represent the 22 calendar year accordingly. Some more background information on this. Establishing a level of service for the county has not been a small undertaking, and this has taken several renditions and several revisions in order to get to that point where we can confidently say this is a fairly good baseline of what our services are to our stakeholders. Administration did conduct several workshops essentially to gather that information from council to set those targets and provide what we believe is the best case scenarios given the annual budget to formulate what the reasonable targets for this should be. By implementing measurable and realistic goals, the service level targets can be relatively set. Once these targets are set, this provides a baseline for those services and those defined levels of service. As a public can then be aware of essentially, as we do get questions on an ongoing basis about what the services are provided to citizens, this provides a move forward document that basically illustrates what that is, and we incorporate as well into this not just written verbiage but mapping that details those things accordingly as well. Some alternatives that could be looked at. This is a living document. Like I said, this can be revised at any given time at the purview of council. Because it is tied to budget, it should be looked at on an annual basis and reviewed accordingly to move the needle essentially on what the level of service could be moving ahead. And as that goes, like I said, this will be something that, because of the transition from the election, having new elected officials, this was not brought forward essentially at that time just because of the amount of information that is contained within this. The Public Works operational budget is approximately $10 million annually, so this compromises almost a third of our total overall budget. Financial impact, obviously the budget considerations have all gone through. There is no, outside of my time preparing this document and other staff that have associated details with this, there is no direct financial impact on that level, but this is a large financial document in and itself, representing the level of service that the county will provide to its residents and stakeholders. So reasons for the recommendation. To ensure the stability and direction of services to the stakeholders of Lethbridge County, it is important to stipulate what that baseline level of service is going to be that we're going to provide through an approved budget. Due diligence of administration is working within the approved budget to deliver the services based on council priorities and field level observations of maintenance needs. As I said, this is a living document, and by no means are these sometimes finite. The one challenge that obviously all of you know as agricultural related individuals is whether plays a prevailing factor in what we can provide or what we can do as far as the timeliness of services and what we can actually set as our target goals. Levels of service are living documents that require flexibility, and that is something that we look at on an ongoing basis. So my recommendation today to council is consideration for adopting the 2022 level of service policy for public works maintenance, and this will be the basis for the 2022 operations budget. And in conjunction with that, one thing that has been amalgamated into this is policy 351, which is the market access network haul roads. This is all, the document is attached, but it basically labels off all of the existing haul roads that we essentially have. The one thing is it doesn't really talk to the levels of service. It basically just says we have a haul road network. So that has been amalgamated into the larger level of service document.
Thank you, Jeremy. Council, what are your thoughts? Any discussion, questions of Jeremy? Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we have provision in the level of service for spot grading or on-demand needs?
Those are variable pieces that are flexible, that we have to make adjustments season to season, month to month, week to week. I mean, it is something that goes on an ongoing basis.
We discussed during our review of this earlier that there might be a possibility that as intense use happens, very, very limited time, but a high use. Should that be in this document, or is that not part of what we're dealing with right here?
There is a flexibility portion that we equate for within the budget to make adjustments as we need to. Our goal is not to be reactive to maintenance, is to provide a blanket level of maintenance, and we are working on increasing our communication level with the outside area so that we find out when those intense uses are, so that we can basically keep our operators not just watching for it, knowing that it's going on.
Thank you.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not a question, but more a comment. I, for one, appreciate the effort and the time that was put into trying to, fine tune this and understanding that this is a living document. But I just wanted to commend you and your team on putting together a really comprehensive document that we can work with and massage, as needed. And I just wanted to make sure that was put out there.
Thank you. This is, like I said, this is a living document, and the one thing that I don't think this thing will ever finish being revised, because as we update and as staff brings things forward, we're trying to expand essentially on this document so we can be as transparent as possible to the public on what we're providing to them.
Anything further from council? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move that the council adopt the 2022 level of service policy for the public works maintenance. Do we want to do this in two?
Probably, I would think, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, well, let me retract that then. Let's rescind policy 351 market access network first. So if I could, I would like to move that we rescind policy 351 market network haul routes.
Yep. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's all.
Yep, for sure. Okay, so any further discussion on that? So John has motioned to rescind policy 351 market access network haul routes. This is repetitive, as the haul route network is represented in the 2022 level of service policy for public works and budget accordingly for annual maintenance. So the motion will be to rescind policy 351 market access network haul routes. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried? And Mark?
I would like to move that council adopt the 2022 level of service policy for public works maintenance.
Thank you, Mark. Any discussion? The motion is that council adopt the 2022 level of service policy for public works maintenance. Any further discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Carried. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The one thing I just want to mention, should we take a quick recess now? Because we do have an 11 o'clock delegation again.
Yep. If there is no objections, we'll take a recess to just before 11 o'clock, I suppose. Thank you. We'll reconvene the meeting here at 10:59. As I said, we do have an 11 o'clock delegation with MLA Grant Hunter. We're hopeful that he does make it, and we will just table this if he does show up. But having said that, we'll keep the meeting going. So we'll move on to item G 3.1, fire service response fees waiver request. Morning, Jen. Morning, Byron.
I have to take my mask off. Thank you, Reeve Campbell. I have to thank Larry for preparing this report in my absence while I was off. I usually do these up, so I'll run through it. I'm sure Byron will have additional comments with regards to the incident, but as per the report, the Coalhurst Fire Department responded to an outside fire within the county on September 1st of 2021. The property owner was invoiced for partial response costs as per the schedule of fees bylaw that was in place at that time. The owner is now requesting that council waives the fire service response charges in the amount of $487.50. So the department responded to a call that was made by a passerby who saw large quantities of smoke coming from the property. Upon arrival, it was determined that the owner was burning from multiple burn barrels without proper mesh coverings, as per the burning barrel definitions and regulations. There's also a large pile of debris in front of the barrels burning on the ground that would have required a permit for an open fire as per the burning bylaw. Lethbridge County Fire Services require that the owner put the fire out, which he did. I think by Lethbridge County Fire Services, that's likely the Coalhurst Fire Department, which he did using a garden hose that he had on site. So, as in the past, administration has made the recommendation to not waive the charges as they were issued as per the bylaw that was in place at the time, and they were not following the approved burn barrel rules, as well as failed to acquire a burning permit for an outdoor fire. Some options, of course, would be that council can decide to waive the fees that we're speaking of. This would satisfy the request of the individual, but could set a precedent for future invoices that come forward, particularly since the fire services bylaw fee schedule has been changed. The letter of the property owner has been attached for council's reference, and I'll just make note that the actual cost of the call was $1,083, but based on the previous bylaw, they were only charged the $487.50.
Thank you, Jen. Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's pretty obvious there was a lot of violations in this issue. The other one, I just wanted to have a bit of a clarification on what difference does that make if you have a mass and what do you call that? That mass thing on top of your burning barrel. Does that keep it from blowing out and contain better if you have that?
If I may, Mr.
Byron?
Speaker. In the fire bylaw, we have the mesh on top. It's a spark arrestor, so that as sparks gibble and stuff, it's containing them inside. So with an open permit, you don't have that. Now we need a permit to burn. Where a burn barrel, we kind of allow them to do it as long as they follow the rules, which has a spark arrestor on the top. So.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a clarification question. Appreciating that this was called in by somebody passing by and the fire department showed up. Had he been following the rules and regulations for a burning barrel in the sense that he had a mesh on the burning barrel, would we still be invoicing him?
Mr. Kivers, through the chair, no, we would not. That would been just a call that a passerby called in, and we would get there and he was meeting all regulations, and we would have not invoiced for it.
John?
Sorry, and one other follow-up. I also understand that in addition to the burning barrels, he had a pile of debris that was burning that would have been considered an open fire, which would have required a permit.
That's correct.
And that, there was no permit for that.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Eric, and then Lauren, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. He has in his letter that he left a voicemail with us. Was that voicemail ever found, or is that, can that not be verified?
Byron?
If I may, he did leave a voicemail. I tried calling him. I have in my notes, I tried calling him a couple times after that voicemail was left. He did not have an answering service. So it was, yeah. I called him a couple times and felt after that it was up to him to try again. So.
Lauren? Thank you. Klaus?
I think this is just a point that this person didn't have the patience that he should have had with waiting for a permit and everything like that. So I would just like to move that the request to waive the fire service fees in the amount of $487.50 as per invoice 117437 be denied.
Thank you, Klaus. Any further discussion? So Klaus has moved that the request to waive the fire service fees in the amount of $487.50 as per invoice 117437 be denied. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Byron. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
We will move down to item G 3.2, rescinding of emergency preparedness policy number 802. Good morning, Larry. Oh, sorry. Just hold on a sec, maybe, Larry. We will not. Mr. Hunter is here, so we will. Good morning, Grant.
Good morning.
Please take a seat.
Good morning. All right, sounds good. Hot seat, is that what they call it?
We've all taken a turn this morning.
Good morning, MLA Hunter. Thanks for joining us this morning. Good, thank you. Maybe we'll just start by going around the table quick and have council introduce themselves. Mark, would you like to start?
Good morning, Mark Sayers. I'm the Division 3 counselor, first term counselor.
I'm John Purvis, Division 4, and this is my first term as well.
I am Klaus Van der Veen. I've my second term, and I represent District 6.
Eric?
Good morning, Eric Van Essen, Division 5, first term counselor.
So first term, then I don't see a name.
I was brought in on a by-election, so did not get here until January.
Sounds good.
Good morning, Grant. Lauren.
Good to see you again, Mark.
One is East Fifth, Division 7.
I'd like to say thanks for joining us this morning, Grant. The floor is yours.
Well, I just wanted to know what are the rules? Like, everybody seems to have different rules here. You can hear me okay with my mask on?
Yes,
Do you
just
want me to take it off?
Take it off.
Take it off?
Yep.
Okay.
And if you can have your mic on too, Grant, then for the online as well.
All right. So I didn't realize this, but I don't hear so well. Maybe that's my construction background, but so I read lips. So I have a little hard time with these masks. I have a hard time hearing what people are saying. So I'm glad that I can be here today. I have asked that I asked my assistant to reach out to all of the councils in my riding so that I could meet with them, as there's lots of new faces this term, and so this is the first time that I've been able to meet with you. It's been a busy little while since you guys have gotten in, and probably feel like it's baptism by fire with all the stuff that's going on. I hear you, and I completely recognize this is my second term, but my first term in government. So I want you to know that, first of all, I want to be able to provide you with a bit of a rundown about what we're doing as a government, and then kind of hit on some key issues and then turn the time over to you, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Can you tell me how long I have?
The floor is yours.
What's that?
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
The floor
I
is
don't know
yours,
if you know
Grant.
that I'm a politician. That is impossible. All right.
No, take what you need.
We'll give 6. I wanted to first of all say that that budget's coming out probably the 24th, we'll be introducing the budget, the new budget. As you know, I sit on Treasury Board. We've been deliberating the 22-23 budget. There is, I think it's a very positive budget. One of my biggest concerns as a fiscal conservative is that we were looking at an over $18 billion deficit this year because of COVID and because of we were actually giving our oil away at the beginning of 2021. Since that time, there's been in economics, there's a V curve. They call it a V curve economics. What's happened is it's just basically a V curve. It went down really quickly in terms of our GDP, but it has rebounded very quickly as well because the fundamentals are still really good. Hey, thank you so much. The fundamentals are still really good in Alberta. We have a lot of, because of some of the strategies we've employed, which reducing corporate income tax, reducing regulatory burden, a lot of companies have re-looked at Alberta and are starting to come in. But I wanted to say to you, because there's some new faces around the room here, when we were in the throes of experiencing negative oil prices, and when we were seeing the OPEC countries increasing supply, we didn't know what was going to happen. We had never experienced something like this in Alberta ever before. And so the Premier reached out to Travis Taves, who's the president of Treasury Board, and said, come up with some solutions, figure some stuff out, because we can't just rely on oil and gas anymore in this province. Well, that's what we were thinking. And so the president of the Treasury Board came to us as Treasury Board members and said, each of you represent a region. I want you to go back to your region. I want you to think about what does your region offer? What are some of the things that your regions offer? And come back with a value proposition, and we'll have each of you pitch. And then we're gonna have a what's called countercyclical envelope, countercyclical spending envelope. So we're gonna have X amount of dollars that we're gonna throw into trying to get ourselves out of this negative turn. Every country in the world did it. Every jurisdiction in the world did it. Trillions of dollars went back into the economy, which is one of the reasons why we're seeing inflation. But that's another point. So, anyways, came back. We actually went and pitched. I came back here, chatted with some people. In fact, I think I talked to Lauren a couple of times. And we realized that this corridor between Lethbridge and Medicine Hat is already naturally an agri-food processing corridor. And that if we were to inject some capital in strategic areas, such as increasing water supply for irrigation, more irrigation, twinning Highway 3 in certain areas. Well, we wanted to twin it all, but we didn't have that much money. And then also having this area, this corridor, be a place where agri-food processing companies could come in and not have to jump through so many hoops, because we would have it as a pre-approved zone. If we did that, we could probably really see an exponential growth in agri-food processing. So I pitched it. I pitched it to Treasury Board, pitched it to the Premier's office, and we actually got, we knocked it out of the park. We convinced them that we should increase irrigated acres, that we should twin Highway 3 between Taber and Burdett. And so all of this is as a result of a really bad storm that hit Alberta, but we tried to make, I'm mixing metaphors here, but we tried to make lemonade out of lemons. And that's where we're at right now. Based upon that, once we actually announced that we were going to add an extra 206,000 irrigated acres, it's actually up to over 250,000 irrigated acres now. We keep on adding some more as we figure we can do it. Since we've done that, a whole bunch of multinational corporations that are in the agri-food processing space have contacted us saying, we've never heard of this big of an opening up, and so we want to come into your area, and you guys can tell us what your value proposition is and how we can take advantage of this. Because as you know, water is the new gold. It's the new black gold, and if you can get water, and especially the kind of water we have out of the eastern slopes, which is some of the best in the world, this is where those agri-food processing companies want to set up. That's the good news. That's great news. It's going to see an absolute boom in between Lethbridge and Medicine Hat over the next 20 years because of what's coming down the pipe. And we did announce last year in July the Chin expansion, which is 60,000 irrigated acres. So I know people were saying to me, Grant, when are we going to see some announcements on this? Not just this high aspirational stuff. And I said, stay tuned. You know, there's a few things we got to jump through. So we announced that Chin, Devin Dreeshen, Minister of Agriculture at the time, came down and we announced together that expansion. So there's 60,000 irrigated acres, and then there's going to be an extra almost 200,000 acres, irrigated acres, that will be announced in the coming months. So stay tuned. And I know everybody keeps on trying to ask me, well, where is that going to happen? And I know that they want to do that so they can figure out if they can buy some land in those areas. But we're keeping tight-lipped, and we're not telling anybody where that's going to happen. So that's kind of the exciting things that are happening. Stay tuned for the budget 24th. We go back into session on February the 22nd. I know there are some major issues in some things such as EMS, policing. Let me see here. What are some of the other things? MSI. Okay, so those are the three big ones that I keep on hearing from councils and Reeves and mayors. So I'll just do a really quick little chat about it, and then I'll turn it over because I'm sure you guys are going to have questions, and maybe we can go into a little more details on that. So EMS. I guess from what I understand from health, the amount of calls and demands on EMS has exponentially grown throughout the province, and they're trying to get to the bottom of why this has exponentially grown. They think it's probably because with COVID, they don't go into a hospital, or they don't go into a doctor's office, and then when they're really, really sick, they will just call an ambulance, and that's what they think is happening. But they haven't been able to get down to the granular concerns about how that is happening. But there is an exponential growth. We've added an extra 136, I believe, it might be 136 or 163 new paramedics, and we're trying to be able to keep up with it, but we're being snowballed. And that's just one of the problems. And we've had multiple problems for a long time, as everybody here knows. It's just been kind of an ongoing thing. And I'll be honest, do we have press here? All right. So good. All right. So as long as the press is kind to me. I think we made a mistake 12 years ago when we actually got centralized EMS. I've been actually on the record of saying that, so I don't know if that's hidden information. And I think that we probably should go back to a regional approach, or municipalities being able to determine their need. I think it worked way better back 12 years ago than it is right now. So we got two problems. We got dispatch that's just been centralized. And I think I was pretty bullish when I came in, I think when Lauren was the Reeve here, and said, I know you guys are upset and concerned, but, let's give it a chance. And I really tried, and I think that, we've seen a whole lot of problems with the centralized dispatch. And so there is a committee that has been struck with R.J. Sigurdsson, MLA for Highwood, and Tracy Allard, MLA for Grand Prairie Wapiti, something like that. And then also Tanny Yao from Fort McMurray, who actually was an EMT or a paramedic before he became a politician. They are going to they're striking up a committee that will be moving quickly on trying to be able to figure out how we can fix some of the problems with EMS. So stay tuned with that. I think that we've got at least Alberta Health Services is actually recognizing that we've got to fix some things. One of the major problems that has been going on for a long time is the paramedics will get stuck in the hospital and not be released sometimes for 12, 16 hours. And that has got to stop. Like, yes, there's a fiduciary responsibility and responsibility of these guys to make sure that, that they're passing it off with someone taking it over. And so whether or not it's administration that has to be fixed, We got to work this out. We've got some good heads on this, so stay tuned. I think that that's going to help. The policing. So I want you to understand that this is a very, very supercharged issue right now, because changes could, just in and of itself, change can cause lots of people to lose their heads. But here's the reality. We have had a rural policing problem for a long time, and it's just getting worse. When I hear of a constituent that has had to sleep in his Quonset because he's been broken into so many times that he can't get insurance now because he's lost so many things, he can't get insurance, and he's sleeping in there with a gun. We've got a problem. We have to address this issue. And so there was a fair deal panel that looked at this to see whether or not there's something we can do. And one of the recommendations that came out of it was to possibly do a provincial police force rather than contracting the RCMP to do the job. Right now, probably about 60%, a little under 2/3 of the province already has a provincial, whether it's Calgary Police or Edmonton Police. So we already have a majority of the policing that is happening through, I guess, a provincial solution. And so this would just kind of transition about a third over to more of a provincial solution as well. We haven't made a decision on it, just so you know. But there's a lobby group and Federation of National Federation of Police, like FNCP, I think that's what it is. They have allocated over $300,000 to advocate on behalf of their union, they just became unionized. And so, they're doing a great job. They're doing a better job than we're doing at being able to get our message out there. And I keep on telling the Premier, if we're going to sell this, we got to get out there with the information, because I got people who are contacting me on a regular basis saying, what are you guys doing? And so I want to just say, first of all, PricewaterhouseCoopers has done 3 very in-depth studies on the cost of transition, the scope of it, so how it would affect and whether it would be a good thing or a bad thing, the pros and cons. They kind of did a SWOT analysis. And then there was a third study that was done, like present, future, and past comparative analysis and trends and stuff like that. It was really well done. I recommend that you go online and read those. And if you can't find it in a few days, just text me or email me, and I will send you the links so that you can read it. I recommend you do that before you get upset about us. Even looking at this. So the policing, always the question that I get is this going to be a real cost to us that is going to cost more for our ratepayers? That's a very valid question. And based upon the information that was sent out through PricewaterhouseCoopers, this would actually we'd have more boots on the ground at less of a cost to our ratepayers of Alberta. So I know that there are people who question that, and I've had in-depth conversations with these individuals. I ask you just to please read those reports, and then we can have more of an in-depth conversation about it, an informed conversation. The last thing that I wanted to talk about was the MSI. MSI is, so we're moving to a new framework, and we were supposed to move to it sooner than we are, but because of COVID and because of a few other things, we've pushed it off. And so we're staying with the current MSI. But what happened was, as you know, we were moving down in terms of what we were funding. There was going to be a drop. But that drop was going from, let me just get the notes here so I've got the numbers right. So in there was a 25% reduction And this has kind of been, I think it's been 3 years or that this has been discussed. But what happened was we were going to drop it, and then for those 3 years, it was just going to be those 3 years that were going to be dropped. And so it was going to be moving down to average of about $722 million over those 3 years. And what happened was, with the COVID, one of the things we said was, well, we know we're going to do some counter-cyclical spending, and we're going to try to inject to get people back to work and keep them working. And so as a Treasury Board, we made a decision to actually backload or front load that MSI money. So the out years, the last couple of out years, we took some of that money and we gave it to you guys. So rather than receiving $722 million, we gave the province $1.196 billion. In 2021, we gave that much to them. So it was a $500 million envelope that we basically just brought forward. Now that $500 million envelope, I fought hard to make sure it went through MSI because there was lots of chatter by the bureaucrats to put a new program together. And I said, MSI, everybody knows how to make that work, just keep it at MSI. And so we won that battle, and the MSI is what they got. So the amount should have been $722 million, but we gave $1.196 billion, and then so the last 2 years, which is this year and next year, the amount is got to go down to be able to make up for that front end loading that we did. I know it sounds a little convoluted, even to me when I'm saying it, it sounds convoluted, but that is how it's happened, and so I hope that that's clearer than what it sounded to me when I was saying it. Actually, there is one last thing I wanted to say, and that is the border crossing. As of 10:04 this morning, trucks and vehicles were going through. That's an update. Okay? That has been nonstop 4.5 days now, where I've been on the phone with the Justice Minister, the Premier, and the guys who are down there trying to be able to negotiate opening up a lane so that we can get trucks back moving down there. As you know, that's the only border we can actually get live animals through. And so this was causing us major backup, and Cargill was going to slow things down, and I told these guys, you're not winning over hearts of Albertans when you do this, so please don't break the law and let the traffic go through so that we can get things going. I said, you have the right to protesting, but it's peaceful protest, not just, anarchy. And anyways, it took us a while, but it's open. It's as of 10:04 this morning. The trucks and vehicles are starting to move. With that, I turn the time back to you, Mr. Reeve, and any questions you guys might have.
Thank you. Thanks, Grant. Like you said, I'm sure you're hearing a lot of the same things where you go. So you did really, highlight a lot of the concerns that we have. I think we share with our neighbors. One of our priorities as a council is trying to be more collaborative, work with our neighbors, especially the city and our surrounding municipalities, and like you said, realize the potential within this agri-food corridor that we have here. So that is a priority of ours. And one of those things revolves around water, and not just irrigation water, but if we're going to, plant the flag and try and attract value add and that processing, we are very hampered by our lack of potable water, raw water, and wastewater. So that's, a big concern of ours. We're trying to, we're hopeful that we can get to the table with the city and try and work with them, as they are the, kind of the gatekeeper as it is right now. We continue to stress to you and your colleagues that we see water as a regional resource, and at the time we struggle seeing if that's, actually the case. We would like to see that a little more cooperation and collaboration. So if there's anything that the government can do on that side, I know we've spoken to MLA Neudorf, MLA Minister McIver, and shared that message with them. So that's definitely something that's high on our radar, is trying to increase that capacity. You touched on the policing. We have stated that we're not currently in favor of transitioning towards a provincial police service. Our concerns revolve around, I think, what we see as a lack of clear costing within the PwC report, our level of participation in that, what that would look like, what the municipal input would be. Those would be some of our key concerns. Having said that, we are aware that there are some engagement sessions coming up. We fully intend to participate in those, and hopefully we can maybe flesh some of those details out, and we can become better informed.
Sure.
I think the biggest impetus for putting our statement out there was to make our citizens aware. We knew this was an issue for municipalities, but from what we were hearing on the ground, it really wasn't resonating with residents. So we wanted to make people aware, and we did push out links to that PwC report and encourage people to do their research and have those discussions. So that's been something we've been trying to champion. On the funding side, obviously, we have seen a haircut on a number of issues, on a number of files, and that is obviously concerning to us. But like you said, I know you're aware of that. I know you're hearing that. I guess it ties into some of your earlier points with those investments in agriculture and in irrigation. I think it's very welcome from the producers. We're hopeful that we can increase that production, but on the other side of that, with increased production, we also see some new strains, new stresses on our infrastructure. And I know you've addressed that with the twinning of the highways, but I think more at our level, at the municipal level, we're hopeful that we can somehow find some funding or funding sources to keep up with that increased demand. And then moving down to the emergency services, you touched on that. I think we're all happy to see that there's been some traction on that, and that hopefully things will start to improve there. I know we have local stories, even stories within this room of, calling an ambulance and the ambulance not knowing where to go. That's scary. And I know you know that, but we're thankful that hopefully it's being addressed, at least in its initial stages. And maybe just to piggyback on that a little bit, we're a municipality, but our citizens need doctors, and they go into the large urbans for doctors. I know you've been on Mayors and Reeves. I know you've heard our calls, concern around that. And I know the province is taking some steps to try and, maybe work towards some solutions on that front. So we do appreciate that. That is something that we hear from our citizens, that concern over access to doctors and access to EMS. Mm-hmm. Overall, I think, we fully acknowledge, we beat on you guys. We're hard on our MLAs, and we realize you have a tough job, but at the same time, we're trying to do what's best for our ratepayers and our citizens. We want to be part of that solution. We want to work collaboratively. We realize the potential that is in this region through agriculture and through the other industry we have there. So if we can work together to add value and overcome some of those limitations, constrictions, that red tape portion, we're definitely willing to have those discussions and like to be part of the solution. So I guess that's kind of my takeaways, and I would open the floor up to council for any further comments. Lauren?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a couple of things, Grant. When you talked about EMS and ambulances, I know a lot of people used to just jump in their car and drive into the hospital to emergency services there. But now they seem to want to call the ambulance because there gets looked at actually faster if you go in an ambulance than you do by your own motor vehicle. Yep. And then hence we have no ambulances again. Yep. So that's, I don't know how you deal with that situation, but
I've heard that, yeah.
And the other thing was just a comment I would like to make on policing. When I went to the meeting the Minister of Justice had in Claresholm, there was a lot of questions about the judicial system and how the fact is that criminals really don't get other than a slap on the hands, much of a discouragement to be a criminal. And I'm going to just briefly tell you the example the one guy from Fort McLeod gave. He said they have a gentleman there who has 73 charges against him currently. He was brought forward to the judge only under one and got another suspended sentence, and he still has 72 more to go up to. So the question was brought up, why don't they deal with them all at once and actually do something with this guy? So just a comment rather than a question maybe. Thank you.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know how to answer that question, Lauren, but I certainly heard the revolving door scenario. you know, unfortunately, that is a bit of a federal problem because, you know, they weren't giving us our judges fast enough, and some of the judges they were giving were, I don't know, maybe a little more liberal than I think that they should have been. So revolving door doesn't work. You can have all the policing that you want out there, but if you can't keep the criminals, or at least deter the criminals from wanting to go out there and to be criminals, then yeah, they're going to keep on doing what they're doing. In fact, it's going to embolden them. My story that I gave you about that guy who had to sleep in his Quonset because he had broken it so many times, that is all over the province. It's like, my riding is actually pretty good. Like, we've had pretty, in terms of the stats, they don't look as bad, but I have lots of farmers that tell me, I don't even call the police. I don't tell them about it anymore because they don't do anything. So I don't know whether or not the stats are skewed in that way, in that we've got more problems than the stats show. But anecdotally, I will tell you that I certainly do hear people telling me when they hear about our what we're trying to do. So yeah, good points. Lauren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll take my mask off because I have hearing aids as well, and I understand your plight there. I just comment in terms of, I commend the province right now in taking a hard look at Alberta Health Services and emergency. From a personal standpoint, I sat with my son and the EMTs that brought him into Children's Hospital for 8.5 hours before he was released into the Children's Hospital. And that was 10 years ago. That problem is something that's been a systemic problem that has gone on way too long, and there really needs to be some adjustments for that. And I firmly believe that doing that will take a significant burden off of the shortage of ambulances. The other thing that I've heard from EMT staff is the going off when you're off duty, and we're seeing a problem with it rurally, where if they have to take a transfer to Calgary, as soon as they're done and they're released, they have to actually go online, and then they get stuck in Calgary for the duration of their shift, which leaves a significant shortfall for our rural area, because that ambulance really should have been headed back to our community so that they can service our community, but they get stuck in Calgary because there's a shortage there, and that causes a significant deficit and causes a real potential for loss of life here. So I mean, I think that's something that also really needs to be addressed, and if you could maybe have a chat with people and forward that cause as well, that would be appreciated.
Sure,
from my standpoint.
You bet. You know, the other thing that I wanted to say is this is always an ongoing issue, is the HALO issue as well. I know that STARS does a great job. They really are a fantastic organization, but HALO is really this fantastic program down here as well. And we, the last health minister was not as interested in being able to just take a listen to what they offer. And this new health minister, Minister Copping, has also said that we are going to figure this out. What I've been advocating and they've been advocating for is for a dedicated versus a fee-for-service contract. So a dedicated amount of $1 million, at least $1 million, that's what they need, because they can actually fundraise another $1 million. And then I know through municipalities, they're also kicking in and they're raising about $1 million. So they need about $3 million to be able to make this thing work, which I think is a phenomenal program and a service to have down here in southern Alberta. So I'm fighting to make sure that we have that and have that dedicated source or dedicated contract as well, just so you know.
Just a brief a question, I guess, around Alberta Health Services. Like, for years, regardless of the party in power, this has been an ongoing issue. So there's been study after study after study. Has there ever been would there be possible to just do a look at Alberta Health Services in general and give it a haircut or review, go through it and see, you know, they keep deflecting, and it seems like the problem's everybody else, but to me, it would be good to just have Alberta Health Services reviewed And it just seems to be getting this bigger and bigger, which goes back to your point about, you know, when it was region or pulled out of the regions and centralized. I agree with you 100%. It didn't work and hasn't. And it's not just with that, it's with all like industries right across the province. Anything that's been centralized hasn't been real effective. So that's the one thing that's been kind of going back and forth in my mind is at some point, when is Alberta Health Services going to be held accountable? And are they an independent body? They're not a government. They're
funded by
but
the
they're
government.
an independent.
But they are a $24 billion corporation.
Right.
So Mark, Ernst & Young did a really in-depth study of Alberta Health Services, came up with, you know, dozens of really good, solid strategies. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we haven't been able to implement all of them that would make them better. So, yeah, it's tough when they're dealing with COVID because it has literally knocked everybody's needs out from underneath them, and Alberta Health Services is no different. So that, you know, I hope we still have the ability to implement the stuff that we've heard. Now, there's some things that I disagree with, that Ernst & Young. Some of the things that they said in there they wanted to do is shut down some of the rural hospitals and some of the rural health units, and I disagree with that. They did not take into consideration distances, and I think that was kind of a mistake to that report, which the Premier and everybody in caucus has already said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not shutting down any of these units because of those distances that people have to go. So we're trying to figure out how we can save money on, you know, a $24 billion corporation. And still, you know, we want to have the best and brightest come here. We want to have the best and brightest doctors. We want to have the best and brightest nurses and healthcare professionals. And that's just, it's not easy to do unless you can pay them. And, you know, ask Saskatchewan, ask Scott Moe how hard it is to be able to have doctors stay because they don't pay as well as Alberta does. And that's just reality. We pay more for our healthcare professionals than they do in other places. The Maritimes is flat on their back when it comes to doctors. You cannot get in there and see a doctor in the Maritimes. So, but there's so much we can do. Like truth is that there's layers upon layers upon layers of managers within the Alberta Health Services. That is true. It's not exaggeration. One healthcare professional that I talked to said, I have 13 managers. Now, to put that into perspective, WestJet staff to manager ratio is 1 to 27. In health services, in AHS, it's 1 to 4. And, you know, we need to be a little less top-heavy.
And that was my point. I wasn't referring to the nurses and doctors because I have mad respect for them. It's the bureaucracy. And it's just every time somebody, you know, we get new government, it just gets bigger and bigger. And then we hear about the problems and the costs and the overruns. And if I was a doctor looking at the bureaucracy of AHS, I'd be running out of this, you know, too. I think we got a great province. I think we're fortunate to what we have. Our healthcare system's good, other than the fact they can't find you when you need an ambulance. But that's another story, so.
Yeah.
Klaus?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, that's kind of the point I want to get at too, and you just kind of said too that it's a big corporation, the Alberta Health Services, and is there not a way that the government can have some influence there? Because it just seems like they're on their own, and the government has no input in there, and that they, because I mean the majority they get their money from the government and from all of us, of course. But that we can't have a handle on it and what's going on there, because just like you said, there's a manager on every 4, and in other districts it's different. So I was wondering if, can't the government do something about that?
Well, Klaus, I can tell you that we've been trying, but our timelines have been knocked off with the COVID. It's made it a lot slower in terms of our reforms that we're trying to do. But let's just be clear. We have tried to tackle probably more than we should have in one term, right? I mean, we're 3 years into this, almost 3 years into this, and if the polls are correct, change is not really acceptable to Albertans or most people. I think that's what it is. I mean, it's just we have tried to do so much so fast. You know, the Premier, you know, the campaign promises, that booklet was like 372 campaign promises. Unheard of. You never hear of that, right? You maybe have a dozen and you work on those, and 372. I was a big part of that in terms of the red tape reduction initiative, setting that up and getting government out of the way of Albertans, which we made some pretty good progress on that. But there's so much more that we really need to do. And I agree with you, but COVID has put slowed things down on that front, the healthcare front. But on the other fronts, we have been moving at breakneck speed. It's just you can't tell Albertans this. There's all the air is sucked out of the room when it comes to talking about something because they're only talking about COVID. You know, for 2 years. So two-thirds of our time that we've been in government has been dealing with this pandemic. And that is all that the media wants to talk about. It's really all that most Albertans want to hear about. And so we can't tell them about the other stuff we've done. We've done we've finished 90% of the 372 campaign promises. But you ask most Albertans, they'd be like, I have no idea what you guys have done. That's just reality.
I have another one, and that kind of comes to about the same thing, and that is with the government bureaucracy. I mean, we have so much bureaucracy there. There are so many managers there, and it's always, if we want to get something done, we have to go through so many hoops to get anything done. And we'd like to see a reduction, anyway, I speak for myself here, I'd really like to see a reduction in the amount of, like the managers and everything that you have with the government. Because like being a farmer and trying to get something done, you know, it takes forever to get something done, and you get sent from the one person to the other person, and it's really frustrating.
Yeah, process. If you ever work with a bureaucrat, and I'm sorry for the bureaucrats that are in the room, but these are the good ones, yeah. Municipal bureaucrats are better. You ever work with bureaucrats, the number one concern they have is liability, right? I mean, how are we going to be sued, or, you know, and so, you know, is this group not going to like it, or is that group look, as the red tape production minister, they didn't like it when I came because it just had a hard time figuring out how can we move on things? How can we get things done? Albertans are ready. They want to be able to see less red tape, less hoops to jump through. And to try to be able to get these bureaucrats to move, it was like pulling teeth. It was tough because they are hardwired to think about the liability, and so they're very risk adverse. I come from business all my life. Since knee high to a grasshopper, I've been in business. And I'm not risk adverse. Any businessman, any farmer knows, you know, you roll the dice every year, right? But these guys are not hardwired that way. And so trying to be able to get them to understand where we need to go, how to move at the speed of business, how to be able to not be a hinderment versus be a help. This has been tough, been very tough. We have made some progress, but in terms of size, I can't announce to you what we've done, but there has been good movement on that front. I just can't, because it's a Treasury Board confidence. I can't tell you the details of that, but I just want you to know, Klaus, I think when it does come out, the report comes out and all that stuff, I think you'll be happy with what you've seen. But we just did it through attrition, right? We just addressed the issues through attrition.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, to Glenn. Provincial policing, I don't think that's going to improve anything, because I'll tell you a simple little thing down there. We live out in an open country. The farmsteads are spread out a long ways. We had probably close to 5 or 6 break-ins in the last 4 or 5 years. And I gotta say, the RCMP responded very well.
Okay.
However, I don't think they ever caught anybody. So if provincial policing is gonna be that much better, we're gonna have to have a provincial policeman sleep in our quarters prevent that. So that's impossible. It's never ever going to happen, so I cannot see any improvements happening on that end of it. So that's my thoughts. And then on Alberta Health Services down there, how come we are paying so well and we got so many doctors and nurses leaving the province?
It's not true, Morris.
Well, that's what the media
That's what the media.
tells us.
That's what the media tell you,
Yeah.
and I would just caution you to maybe question whether or not the media is correct on that or not. I can tell you that I have looked many times. Every time I hear someone saying, "Why do we have doctors leaving?" We have a net increase in doctors in Alberta year over year, every year. And I'm sorry, but you can. If you want to see the stats, and then you can take that back to the media, that's fine. But we've sent it out to the media, and they refuse to cover that. So I'm sorry, but that's not true.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because, I never heard anything different because, we just go by what we hear and read from media, and that's sad.
And the other thing is, change is not easy for anybody to accept. Like, you think that the Alberta Health Services wants to accept our changes? No, they don't. They would prefer to be able to kind of do status quo. That's the easiest thing to do. So yeah, they're gonna kick back. They're gonna fight back. But we are elected by Albertans to be able to get some things under control. If we don't get Alberta Health Services in control, as a Treasury Board member, I can tell you, we will never balance the budget. And I cannot do that to my children and grandchildren. It's impossible for me to look myself in the mirror every year or every day and say, I'm giving something good to my children when I'm putting them more in debt. And I think that probably everybody here would agree. We cannot indenture our children. We had no debt 7 years ago. Alberta was debt-free. We did not have to service debt. Now we're $3 billion of service debt to service debt. $3 billion that could be going to building schools. And, we did the hard work. I've lived in Alberta all my life. We did the hard work here. We, under Ralph Klein, whether you like him or you hate him, he did a good thing of getting us out of debt because that $3 billion of servicing debt, we used it for building roads, schools, hospitals, and other infrastructure in this province and put us in an Alberta advantage. We all appreciated and all benefited from it. I don't think anybody here can say we didn't benefit from the Alberta advantage. But we have lost that equation when we see, and that what was happening is a 6% increase in Alberta Health Services year over year. When that happens I can tell you as a Treasury Board member, and transportation is coming in screaming for more money for maintaining the roads that we even have, not even just building new ones. And we say to them, sorry, we don't have any money, we have to give it to health. It's unsustainable. It's called, well, I won't use that word, but it's unsustainable. Because we are... Anyways, I know I'm talking to the converted here. I don't think that, everything I'm hearing here is, I think you'd agree with me. But I often find it confusing when I have someone saying, why aren't you giving us more money to help our roads and our bridges, keep up our infrastructure? And at the same and in another sentence, the same person will say, and by the way, give the healthcare more money. We do every year. Last year alone, we gave them $900 million extra over and above their base budget. $900 million, plus another $1 billion to deal with COVID. All of the money that we had extra from whatever savings we had went back into Alberta Health Services. So for those who say we're not funding Alberta Health Services, please don't listen to what the media are telling you. We are. And we're funding them at higher levels than we ever have in all of the history of Alberta. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox.
No.
Because I know I was...
It's fine. It's fine. No, Grant, we thank you very much for your time. I can tell by your phone there that you're a wanted man and you're a busy man, so thank you for your time. Is there anything that council would like to close with? Mark?
I just want to thank you for coming in. This is like a first-time counselor to sit and listen, and I have a better understanding of elected officials. I have no bruises, no bricks thrown yet. I'm pretty quick. I'm old, but I'm quick. But so I really appreciate your candor in coming in and you know, educating us and explaining, you know, the government's side of peace. So I really appreciate it. So thanks a lot for coming in.
I apologize for the phone. As you know,
No.
we're dealing with a crisis down at the border here. That is a 5-alarm fire, and my phone doesn't stop. It hasn't stopped for 4 days. So thank you so much for your time here today, and keep up the great work.
Thanks, Grant.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for your time, Grant.
Yeah. Have a good one.
Yeah, and good luck there.
Have a good day, Grant. Thanks so much, guys.
We have a lunch coming for noon. I haven't told it's arrived yet, so I think we probably proceed with the next item.
Want to try again, Larry? G 3.2, rescinding of emergency preparedness policy 802.
Sorry, I'm having a deja vu. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, council members. Yes, a very short report here. As you are aware, and we already saw once today at this meeting, county's administration's review of all our policies continues. There's one more we've identified that was sitting way up in the high numbers, 802, that we believe is no longer required, and we're recommending that it be rescinded. And this policy was first adopted back in 1995. It was amended about 4 years ago. This emergency preparedness policy has, run its course, I would say, because of the fact that provincial legislation has changed significantly, and all municipalities, as you are all well aware, are now provincially mandated in the Emergency Management Act to have responsibility for their own emergency management systems and programs within their own communities, as well as approve the emergency plans and programs. As well, the Disaster Services Program Directive, which I've also attached to the back of this report, shows that all staff are required at Lethbridge County to be trained to a certain level depending on their positions within the county, and they are trained, and we are advised by the emergency management program managers out there that Lethbridge County is sort of towards the top of the list, actually, when it comes to having well-trained personnel throughout our administration and all of our staff, again, throughout the county entirely. So having said that, our recommendation, again, is to rescind this policy. And the pros and cons, I guess, we could leave it in place. We don't really see any value in that. Everything's covered off in provincial legislation and this directive that I've referred to. And otherwise, there are no positive or negative financial implications. It's kind of neutral in that sense. We're doing what we're doing regardless of this policy. And it is now, again, redundant, having first been adopted back in 1995. And with that, I will turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Any thoughts or discussion from council? Seeing none? Oh, three of you. Who would like to? Claus?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think with that, it just makes common sense that, so I will move that the emergency preparedness policy number 802 be rescinded.
Thank you, Claus. Any further discussion? So Claus has moved that emergency preparedness policy 802 be rescinded. I'll ask the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Larry.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Let's continue moving down then to G3.3, Town of Coaldale Letter of Support Request for ACP Application, Coaldale and District Master Fire Plan. Larry?
Thanks again, Mr. Chairman. Again, a very short report here, as you can see, and hopefully we had time to have a quick review of this short report, but the Town of Coaldale has requested that Lethbridge County provide a letter of support for their Alberta Community Partnership, ACP, application for grant funding for the development of a Coaldale and District Master Fire Plan. Our recommendation is that we do move forward and provide them with this requested letter of support. It fits in nicely with our strategic plan of having strong working relationships throughout and effective governance and service delivery. And historically speaking, Council has always, I think, supported these sorts of requests, and vice versa. Our municipal neighbors have supported Lethbridge County when we've asked for similar types of letters of support for various grants. The town of Coaldale has already approved the development of a master fire plan in their budget, and therefore they're not requesting any funds from Lethbridge County for this. And just a couple other points, if I may quickly. The town of Coaldale believes the development and preparation of this master fire plan will be advantageous not only to the town itself, but also to the county, because as we know, they're one of our major emergency service providers and fire service providers. And they want this grant to create this plan to help guide decision-making with respect to dollars being put forth for emergency services and fire services throughout. Alternatives, obviously we could not provide this letter. We don't see any benefit in that. And the pro is, of course, that, I think Lethbridge County will get some peripheral benefit from this, and it maintains a strong working relationship with the town of Coaldale. And I think I mentioned, probably got ahead of myself there, a couple of the things. Financial impact, nothing directly to Lethbridge County. And I also made reference to the strong working relationships and effective governance in Lethbridge County strategic plan. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would just turn it back to you. And I would also just note that the letter that we received for this request is actually attached as well. And hopefully you've had a chance to have a look at that. I think it's fairly self-explanatory and provides the rationale for making this request. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Council, any thoughts, discussion? Lauren?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question in their letter, when they talk about physical expansion, second hall, and the expansion to human resources for paid firefighters, is that something that is part of this plan they're asking us to be part of, or how is that? Is this just something of a surprising note to us, or have you had that discussion with them about things like that, or I'm kind of wondering where it's coming from.
Yeah, if I may,
Of course, Larry,
Mr.
yeah.
Chairman, thanks through to Councillor Hickey. I don't know that it's a surprise that we're hearing that. We haven't had specific, in-depth discussions on that level as administration, at least. And the way I would interpret it is just at this point, they're just trying to make that master fire plan, and maybe, expansion in that way that they talk about a little bit there will be justified. Maybe the master plan would identify that, it's not justified and not needed. So, again, my view is that, there's very little risk in supporting it. Having that master plan, maybe that will flesh out and get us to the point where, answers and decisions can be made based on that plan and the rationale as to whether they're needed or not. If that answers somewhat, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a perfect answer for you, but
And maybe I can follow up on that, Larry. From my time with the previous council on the Emergency Services Committee, I recall early on in our first term, so this would go back probably to 2018, when we did have discussions with Coaldale at the time prior to their fire hall expansion. The chief and the committee at that time did indicate to us that this was already on their radar, potentially looking in a very forward-looking way. If there were to be, substantial expansion along the corridor between Lethbridge and Coaldale, couple that with the possibility of the town of Coaldale potentially expanding their service area, and coupled with the potential growth of the town. These were all questions that they were asking themselves at the time, whether it would be prudent to explore some of these avenues, be that a satellite location to help with response times and possibly stretch that response area, having more paid staff to address those similar issues, and then potential expansion location issues. I think that all kind of fed into there. That was something that was on their radar, like I say, in a very forward-looking way. So I think that kind of fits into this as we look at a master plan in a forward-looking perspective. I think it does. This may answer some of those questions, would be my takeaway. John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that Lethbridge County provide a letter of support to the town of Coaldale for their Alberta Community Partnership Grant application for the development of the Coaldale and District Master Fire Plan project.
Thank you, John. Any discussion? The motion is that Lethbridge County provide a letter of support to the town of Coaldale for the Alberta Community Partnership Grant application for the development of the Coaldale and District Master Fire Plan project. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Larry.
You're welcome. Thank you, council.
Lunch is here if you wish to do a brief adjournment.
Okay, why don't we do that then? We'll thank you, Morris.
Lunch, thank you, Mark.
Thank you. I just want to make sure.
Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order at 12:40, and we will move down now to G 3.4, Planning and Development Department 2021 Annual Report. Afternoon, Hillary.
I'm good, thank you. Good afternoon, Council. I'm pleased to bring forward my annual report for 2021. It was quite the year, as you probably saw as you were walking down the hallways and just listening to maybe even citizens in your area. It was a busy year. And so with regards to Planning and Development Department, I'll just kind of outline what happened over the year and then open to if there's any discussion afterwards. So Lethbridge County's Planning and Development Department takes direction from the bylaws and guiding documents that have been approved by County Council that include just to lighten the mood, Jen. That's okay. Anyways, we do take direction from the Municipal Development Plan, our intermunicipal development plans, land use bylaw, and any area structure plan. So those are all our statutory documents. And then we also have some guiding strategic documents like our group country residential land use study and our industrial commercial land use study. The Planning and Development Department manages the issuance of development permits, amendments, and updates to the land use bylaw. We deal with any planning projects that come along, such as when there's a new subdivision that requires, say, an area structure plan or a new commercial industrial development where some planning work is required. Intermunicipal relations and referrals. So I work closely with the planning side of the other municipalities, making sure that we're always referring our documents accordingly and making sure that we're taking into account all of our plans that we have with our 11 intermunicipal neighbors. We also deal with road closures and licensing, road licenses, land use sales and leases, and the enforcement of the land use bylaw and other planning related regulations. In 2021, along with day-to-day duties, we had some projects that we undertook and completed. We had the Hamlet Growth Studies, and we completed the Fairview, Diamond City, and Shaughnessy Hamlet Studies. So that means that all of the Hamlet studies in the county have been completed. So we had 7 of them altogether. They're all completed, and we will, probably every 5 years, we'll take a look at those, make sure that they're still relevant and meeting the needs for those communities. We completed the review and updates to the county's municipal development plan, completed the rezoning and subdivision of the former Monarch Water Tower site, and we still have 4 lots listed for sale there. We reviewed the policies within the Planning and Development Department and brought them forward to County Council for amendment or rescinding as necessary. We did bylaw 21-013, which was a text amendment to the county's land use bylaw, and this amendment allowed for us to clarify the standards and regulations in the bylaw, which was approved by County Council. We completed the Planning and Development Department County Council workshop, which was at the end of November, and also completed the review and issuance of the existing road allowance licenses. That was completed in December. With regard specifically to the Development Authority, so this gets into more of our day-to-day work, 271 development permit applications were received. This is a significant increase from 181 that were issued or received in 2020. So it was a slightly odd year in terms of the volume of permits that we saw coming in. Just looking at how the last month has gone, I'm not seeing that same trend of that increased volume, but we'll have to kind of see how things go over the next few months. It does add a lot of more work on the part of our development officer. The construction value for the permits was coming in at 132 million, which is above the amount that we saw in 2020, which was at 57.5 million. And I just wanted to highlight some of the reasons why we saw some of those increases. I mean, there was some significant significant projects that are being undertaken in our municipality, some of which you may be aware of and some of which you may not. So there are a number of large projects happening out at the city landfill, totaling in the amount of about $16 million. New compost facility, they're adding on to their waste transfer, and they're doing a gas capture in the landfill also. So those projects all together are adding up to a lot of infrastructure being constructed out there. We also have the Cortiva expansion, which came in at around $8 million. There's the Canary Biofuels down in Rave Industrial, and they're two projects that they're looking at constructing are coming in at around $10 million, maybe a little bit more. Bayer Crop Science is doing an expansion on their facility on Highway 3, which was $18 million. And then there was the nursing home that's being constructed next to Broxburn Business Park, kind of to the east. And that one is a large ticket item at $5 million. So that was for the Dutch Reformed Church. They're doing that. So those are the ones that kind of I wanted to highlight. Most of them are commercial, industrial, or institutional in nature. And then we did have obviously a lot of residential permits coming in for new houses, additions and such. In my report, you'll see that I have broken down how the permits were issued, the ones that were issued in 2021. 78 were residential, 57 were accessory buildings, 45 commercial industrial, 47 agricultural buildings, so like your shop buildings, large barns, storage sheds, hay sheds, 4 signage permits, 11 home occupation, 8 public institutional, 3 miscellaneous, so I think those were mostly under kind of a recreational classification, and 3 demolition permits. In addition, the Development Authority also issued 61 compliance letters, which was up from 51 the year before. In the safety codes permits world, which are all issued by Park Enterprises on behalf of the county, they saw also a significant increase. They had 1,065 safety code permits received, and compared to 740 the year before. And also our revenue from that particular contract also went up accordingly. In 2021, the revenue received was just over 137,000, and in 2020 it was at about 74. So, and from what I understand from Park Enterprises, who works with a great number of municipalities in the province, is that this was not uncommon for the entire province. They saw a significant influx of permits coming in from across the board. So I think it was just 2020 being a year that was a little less, and just some momentum in 2021 led to a lot of development happening. With regards to subdivisions, the Subdivision Authority, Council being the Subdivision Authority, made decisions on 34 subdivision applications. 1 application was refused and 33 were approved. With regards to the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board, with an increase in permits and subdivision also comes an increase in appeals. Unfortunately, they kind of go hand in hand. But we did have 6 appeals this last year. There was 4 development appeals and 2 subdivision appeals. And I'll let you review how the outcome of all of those were. And if you have questions later on, please feel free to ask. With regards to redesignations, we had 7 redesignations come into County Council for approval, and all of them were approved by County Council. With regards to area structure plans, we had 1 area structure come in, but it was sent back upon second reading for some further information with regards to the accommodation of a natural drain in that area, and it is still pending a decision. They have not brought that application back for council to review once again to make a final decision on it. Road closures, we had 3 road closure applications. One was in the Lucy Howe subdivision area, which is just north of Highway 3, kind of in between Coaldale and Lethbridge. That was approved by County Council. The Turin Road closure and reconfiguration project was approved by County Council. That's where we realigned the road to match where the actual road right-of-way is, so that we didn't have to relocate the road and accommodate our subdivision of industrial lots in that area. And we finalized the Diamond City lane closure, which had been ongoing since 2015. So quite happy about that one. Land sales and leases. We completed the sale of a residential parcel in Turin. We sold one of the industrial parcels also in Turin. There's 4 up for sale, or sorry, 3 other ones that are up for sale in that area. We advertised the sale of 4 residential parcels in Monarch. And we completed the grazing lease agreement for the Northeast 17-10-24 west of the 4th, which if you are familiar with, that's the near the Monarch area by the Trestle Bridge, the small Trestle Bridge. With regards to intermunicipal relations, we had 38 intermunicipal referrals, which was up from 18 the following year. So once again, we're seeing lots of development, not only in our own municipality, but in those municipalities adjacent to the county. The Lethbridge County and the town of Colehurst did an amendment to the intermunicipal development plan, and this included the the north of Colehurst KIP Industrial Park area structure plan. That's to allow for some industrial development in that area north of Colehurst. And we initiated the town of Coaldale, with the town of Coaldale, a review and update of the town of Coaldale Lethbridge County intermunicipal development plan, which is due for a review this year. So with that, this report is mainly just for your information to see what's been going on with regards to planning and development. For the new councillors, just so you're aware, I do provide quarterly reports, so I will be updating council on a regular basis on things that are going on. The financial impact, I only highlighted the revenue from Park Enterprises, as that's the contract where we see a lot of revenue from. But we can also look into other revenues were also up this year, but I think Jen highlighted that when we did the budget this year. And with that, I have provided the stats that are breakdown of the stats over the last year for the development permits at the end of my report. As usual with our development permitting, residential permits are kind of the biggest in terms of volume, and then coming in with accessory buildings, agriculture, and commercial development. So with that, I'll throw it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Hillary. I'd open up to council. Any thoughts, discussion, questions? Lauren?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 2, could you, you had a development authority decision was overturned by the Land and Property Rights Tribunal.
Right.
Is that a provincial thing, or what is that?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Hickey. So in the province now we have 2 appeal boards. You have a local appeal board, which deals with what is determined as local issues, and we now have the Land and Property Rights Tribunal, which is the provincial board. It was an amalgamation of a bunch of boards at the provincial level, so it includes the Assessment Appeal Board and the MG Municipal Government Board, which used to handle development appeals when a development was next to a highway or a water body. So what happened in 2020, they changed how this board worked and how many appeals they would hear. They actually increased the areas which they would receive appeals from. So now not only is it next to a highway, but it's next to a water body. Any lands that were under a provincial type approval, which could include a feedlot or say a solar facility or a wind facility, they expanded their parameters quite a bit. So in the case of this one that was heard by them, it was for a hydrofac facility in Stewart Siding had located without a permit from Lethbridge County. And so when we looked at it, we refused the application initially because it was in proximity to some existing residences that are in Stewart Siding. There's 3 of them. And a hydrovac facility shouldn't be located really in close proximity to a residence. And we also felt that it wasn't necessarily the best use for the Stewart Siding area in terms of highest and best development. So it was refused by the county, and because they had an environmental approval for that hydrovac facility, it went to the provincial board, not the local board. And that provincial board did overrule the county's decision on that application, and they allowed the hydrovac facility to stay.
Klaus?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. The properties that we kind of make different sizes up in Monarch there. Did you have any bites on that one, or?
Thank you, through the chair, to Councillor Vanderveen. Before we posted the lots for sale, there was an awful lot of activity, and as soon as I posted it for sale, I heard nothing. So that's kind of the way of real estate, I think. I have no doubt that at some point in time they will sell. I will work with Maddie on kind of getting that out again into our, we have signage up there, like on the properties themselves, but we will re-advertise. We'll put that, kind of highlight them on our webpage just to say they're out there. I think some people thought that the price would be significantly lower because they were county parcels, but we kept them at a rate that we felt that was in keeping with the market. So, and if we feel like we need to change that, we'll come back to council with a request to reevaluate those prices in the future.
Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The grazing lease agreement on the Northeast 1710-24 west of the 4th. Heard a little bit of rumblings within my constituents on that one. I was not aware that it was up and available. Did it ever come available to the public, and was it advertised to assume that grazing lease?
Yeah, we have to advertise all of the grazing leases. So yes, it was advertised in the Sunny South News and on our website.
Very good, thank you. That's northeast of the Trestle Bridge. I believe White Lake previously had the lease, and now there's a new leaseholder.
Yes, it was, White Lake Colony had previously had that lease, but their lease was pulled for reasons that I am not aware of. It was pulled before I became in charge of leases, but they hadn't had a lease on there from at least 2010, from what I could see. And I'll just kind of pull up the location so council's aware of where this is. We did talk about this site previously in council in terms of some oil and gas opportunities that could be in this area, and then also what to do with the lease itself. Just so council is aware, if there is an opportunity to have oil and gas in this area, the county, just because we have a lease on there doesn't mean that we would lose that interest. So it is right here. So it's the current lease owners had an interest in this property as it was a property they had owned historically. Here's the Trestle Bridge. So, and it's at a dead end road. We've had an awful lot of problems with trespassers at this particular location. Lots of garbage has been dumped at this location, so we thought the best idea would be to lease it for 3 years, see how it goes, and then we'll bring it back for council to see if we want to carry on in that regard or sell it or do something else with it.
Thank you, Hillary. Anything further from council? John?
I'd like to move that we accept this report for information.
Thank you, John. Any discussion? Motion to move this report for information. Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hillary. Now if we move down to item H, correspondence. So this is a relatively new addition to the agenda in an endeavor to be more open and share the communication that council receives. We have added communication that council, the Reeve CAO receives, and added it to the agenda. So we have 5 items in front of us today. First item from RMA, the Rural Municipalities of Alberta. This letter speaks to the RMA's pursuit of information pertaining to internet speed testing. So they're asking for feedback and help in internet speed testing. So you can go to rmalberta.com, follow the links, and participate in the internet speed testing. I believe that this will be pushed out through our various communication channels. Item 2, letter from Alberta Municipal Affairs. This was a follow-up thank you following our meetings with Minister McIver at the November RMA convention. Item 3, Year of the Garden 2022. Pretty self-explanatory. It speaks to 2022 being the Year of the Garden. There's various avenues which municipalities and citizens can participate. Item 4, this is a confirmation from Alberta Municipal Affairs that our municipality, Lethbridge County, has been confirmed as a participant in the Municipal Internship Program. Item 5 is just a follow-up from the RCMP from our meeting with them at the RMA convention in November as well. Is there anything that council would like to pull out from this and discuss further? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are you looking for a motion to accept this as information?
That'd be wonderful.
I would be happy to motion that we accept all 5 of these individual correspondence as information.
Thank you, John. Any discussion?
Yeah, I'm so happy that we did.
Thank you, Morris. So there's a motion to accept the 5 correspondences as information. Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And if there is nothing further, Mark. Did you have anything further, Lauren? All right. All right. We have a motion to adjourn. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, staff. Thank you, council.